When we got ready to build our last church, the church that now sits down in 10th and L, one of the most beautiful churches in the whole country, we had some problems. Our first problem was we had bought a half of a city block. We wanted to buy the whole city block, but there was a fellow had a little old store, mostly a liquor store, on a corner lot in back of us, and he didn't want the church there at all. We understood, and somebody told me he was about to go broke and was going to have to sell or do something, that he owed the First National Bank a considerable amount of money, wasn't able to pay his debts. We went over, offered to buy the property from him, and he jacked it up about 3 times what it was actually worth. Not only that, but he went to all the other people who had houses on the back side of the city block, and he talked to them, and they all doubled their prices on their houses. What they were really valued at, they just doubled them. And that got us in a jam for parking area. We just didn't have enough parking that the city required, because we just balked at buying all that land back there, all those houses, at an inflated price that was unrealistic, and buying that little old store at a price that was unrealistic. So we went to the city council. In those days, we had a first-class city within the borough, and the borough handled building permits, but the first-class city could override the decisions of the borough and building division out there. So I went to the city council and the mayor. Fact is, I took the city councilmen out one by one to lunch, showed them our plans, what we were going to build, what a beautiful building it would be, explained to them that there's nothing like it in Anchorage and nothing like it in Alaska, that cities all over the world have beautiful church buildings, some of them 500,000 or 600,000 years old, that they're real proud of, and I wanted to build something like that in Anchorage. And then I took the mayor out to lunch, and we asked the city council then for relief from the parking necessities, what the building code called that we'd have to have so many parking spaces. And besides all that, right across the street from the church, and the church was facing a park, and up and down what we call the park strip here, I got the city traffic engineer out there, and we counted 215 parking spaces within 2 blocks of the church, out there in that, right there across the street from the church. That is, that's where they started. And I said to him, come out here. Nobody out here on Sunday morning when we have our biggest crowd. And only time there's anybody out here is Sunday afternoon when they're playing a little ball or something like that. And he reported back to the city council, wrote him a letter, and said he had surveyed it, that he had gone by there on several occasions to see about how the parking was used at the park, and that usually that space was all empty. And he recommended that the city council would grant us the variances that we needed about parking. And there was another restriction, that is that you couldn't build a building over 25 feet high there, because this was right on the edge of housing. And we asked for variance on parking and the height restriction. The city council granted it unanimously. Somebody just made a motion that the variances be granted, and it was passed unanimously. In spite of the protests, the man who run the liquor store had hired a lawyer, and they came down there and they fought it. And in spite of the protests and all the efforts to stop, the city council unanimously granted us a variance on parking and building height. Then the man who ran the booze store filed suit in court against it, and we had to go to court, and the judge remanded it back to the city council, their decision. He said, you didn't handle it according to the requirements of your own city charter, and you've got to go over the whole thing again. So we went back to the city council with the same proposition, and that time somebody on the city council had searched all the requirements out. He said that to be sure that we get this exactly right, I've written this out and I'll read it. And he read the whole requirements for a variance on any building code project. And then he made the motion. And there was one guy voted against it that time. I think somebody had got to him some way or the other. But we got our variance. And then the guy running the booze business, he filed another suit in court to stop it. But when it came up to the judge, he just heard their case, their lawyer, and then he listened to our lawyer and he dismissed the case. And we had all the leverage we needed then to go ahead and build our church. We made a deal with the guy who had the little old store and the liquor store, and bought his property for less than half what he had asked for it to begin with. He had that lot that his store was on, and a lot right next to it with a house. It's just an old run-down house, wasn't worth anything on it. And we bought his property, and then we bought the house next door. And we had all the parking that we really needed there. And we needed some. And of course, that auditorium seat 1,250 people. And it takes a little parking for that many people. So we had a little difficulty building a church there.